WCW Mayhem is the first wrestling game to be conceived by Electronic Arts, and the last true WCW video game that lets you wrestle in the middle of a WCW ring, as the follow-up title, WCW Backstage Assault, would remove the wrestling ring entirely in favor of crappy backstage brawls. We'll save that for another time. WCW Mayhem also had a neat distinction of having an actual WCW pay-per-view event named after it, rather than the other way around, although the show itself was pretty much shite. Setting that piece of business aside, how does Electronic Arts' first foray into the world of sports entertainment fare? Well, short answer is it's better than Nitro, if that means anything. And it's definitely better than Thunder, for what that's worth. But in all honesty, WCW Mayhem is actually not that bad of a game. Dare I say it has a fair shot of being perhaps the best WCW game to grace the PlayStation, which isn't really saying much considering what came before, but for their first wrestling outing, EA put out a rather respectable showing here. Not quite on par with the likes of Revenge, but still something decent. WCW Mayhem features around 40 to 50-ish WCW superstars spanning 6 factions: WCW, NWO Black and White, NWO Black and Red, Horsemen, Hardcores, and Cruiserweights. Obviously, some of these superstars need to be unlocked by winning belts from certain wrestlers, with certain wrestlers. You win belts by competing in the game's Quest for the Belt mode, which is your main beat everybody to win mode. But there's also exhibition matches as well as pay-per-view matches. Essentially matches from actual WCW events that could be played by entering passcodes, an ultimately worthless feature in and of itself considering you could pretty much book these matches together in the main exhibition mode. Match types featured in Mayhem are rather basic. You got your usual singles and tag team contests, your 3-way triangle matches, your 4-way square matches, your hardcore no DQ matches otherwise known as Raven's Rules, and finally your usual battle royal where you knock folks over the top rope until one remains. It's a rather anemic set of match types, although I guess they made up for it by allowing you to leave the ring and brawl backstage, which was apparently a novel feature at the time and something worth bragging about until SmackDown 2 lets you do the same thing. The reason you're not seeing any footage of these backstage areas in this review is because I quite honestly don't need reminders of where EA took the WCW license in their follow-up game. Ugh. But I digress. In terms of control, it's pretty decent. You have a few strike buttons and a grapple button where you can block, you can run, you can taunt, you can pull off strikes, holds, and submissions with quick button presses rather than convoluted button sequences. You can move in 4 directions, which is a novel feature in a WCW game on PlayStation. It all works relatively well for the most part. Collision detection tends to be on the flimsy side at times, but in particular when it comes to grappling, but it's not all bad. More often than not, the collision is just fine. I don't like that they map the grapple button to do other things like get in and out of the ring or pick up weapons or climb turnbuckles, but it's not too bad. The other minor issue, and this is a minor bit, is that every wrestler's finisher, which you can only do when your meter is full, and the game helpfully advises you to finish him. Every wrestler finisher is a grapple move and usually doesn't jive with the wrestler's actual finisher in real life. So instead of finishing opponents with a sharpshooter, you would finish them with a hitman slam. A quarter of the roster has a finishing move called the meltdown. Or at least that's what this list tells me or something. I don't know, it's just a minor detail, but the gameplay itself is generally not bad. Matches tend to drag a bit, but otherwise no real complaints, it's fairly decent fare. Oh, there's the creative wrestler feature, which has become something of a standard feature in these wrestling games, but this one's rather limited. No spaces allowed in names, no customizable movesets, nothing really special here. There's a password system which can be used to unlock stuff like matches and stuff, but you probably won't get much use out of this. WCW Mayhem sports some rather decent looking visuals. The various arena settings and set pieces are rather well rendered by PS1 standards, and are perhaps some of the more impressive looking wrestling arenas on the platform, considering the samey looking arenas of the WWF SmackDown games, and discounting the weird Nitro sets such as the ones in space and stuff. As far as the wrestlers themselves go, well, they look a bit blocky for the most part, but otherwise there's a fair bit of detail to them, and the way the wrestlers move around and perform moves flows rather smoothly and look fairly lively for the most part. It's not stiff or robotic or anything of the sort. Some wrestlers have the wrong poses, however, and entrances, while more elaborate than SmackDown's walk in front of a video entrances, are rather okay-ish at best. You've got pyro, you've got the walk down the ramp, you got ring announcing from Mean Gene Okerlund. What more could I want? Well, unique entrance themes for each wrestler, but I'm getting ahead here. Of particular interest are the camera angles used here. Instead of a static middle of the ring perspective looking down on the arena and the entrance ramp, the camera sort of moves about, following the action as it moves around, switching perspectives and doing quick cuts for certain moves. It's not a big deal, neither enhances nor hinders the gameplay, but it does add a bit to the overall presentation of Mayhem and does help to make it something of a unique feature with the game. I don't know, I kinda like it. In addition to solid visuals, Mayhem also scores in the sound department. Well, somewhat. The highlight here comes in the form of the in-game commentary provided by WCW announced team of Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan, which is pretty well done here actually. It's not the greatest commentary soundtrack in the history of our sport or whatever doohickey you want to call it, and it does eventually fall into that pitfall of getting repetitive after a few matches, but at the very least Schiavone and Heenan sound lively when they talk. The commentary follows the action closely and without delay, and generally do a fairly good job of selling you on the action, which is a bit of a rarity in wrestling games to have really lively commentary that almost sounds as if you're watching a live wrestling match. Most of the time, commentary in wrestling games come off as fake and half-assed, with no enthusiasm and some of the worst lines committed to audio, looking at the majority of the WWE games released today. But Mayhem's commentary is kinda top-notch, almost as if you're watching an actual WCW event with somewhat better quality. And that aspect of the in-game commentary, if nothing else, should be applauded. And it's good that I got that bit out of the way because in terms of the music used, it's rather limited. Some wrestlers have their own entrance music, like Goldberg, DDP, while the rest have entrance music specific to their faction. I mean, come on. Even Attitude had their own unique entrance themes for most of its superstars at least. Otherwise, sound effects are alright. They're your usual punches, kicks, slams, grunts, things of that nature. They sound pretty clear for the most part, not much to say there. Overall, WCW Mayhem on PlayStation is certainly a step above the previous offerings developed by Inland Productions, as it's more of a wrestling game in the classic sense than it is a weird hybrid wrestling one-on-one fighter type of thing like the prior games were. While Mayhem is far from a technical masterpiece, and is somewhat light on match types and features, at the very least it feels somewhat playable, controls alright, and features a varied array of wrestlers to fiddle around with. Those going into Mayhem expecting gameplay and quality akin to the likes of WCW NWO Revenge on N64 will be disappointed, no doubt. It's nowhere near that good. But it's still competently done and did give WCW fans who owned PlayStations at least one decent title to salivate over, or at least one decent title with a sizable roster of WCW talent. If nothing else, WCW Mayhem was a first step in the right direction. It's just too bad it didn't turn out that way, as the follow-up title would prove. But that is another story for another time that I will be more than happy to put off telling anytime soon. I mean, really, it's really that bad. I really don't want to get into it. Yet.